And you've just heard Breathe, which is the opening track on Nicola Madill's album Absentee. And I'm joined by Nicola now. Hello.
Hi, Alistair. Thank you for having me on the show.
It's an absolute pleasure. And before we go on to talk about the album, can you tell us about Breathe, which, as I say, is the first track on the album?
The opening track, it's Breathe is a song that I wrote probably about 6 years ago. And it actually came from a situation that I was in. So my debut album is called Celine. And for the launch night of that album, my mum had gifted me a piece of selenite, which is a lovely sort of, for people who don't know, it's like a sort of moonstone type stone. And one of my friends, who's a jeweler, had put this stone into a necklace for me. And I was in B&M, which is like very an unromantic place to be at the time. But the necklace actually fell, and the stone broke on the floor, and it broke into two. And I had been recently going through a breakup, and I had my head was in the clouds basically. And the symbolism of this stone falling on the floor and breaking in two, it was very important, and it almost like sort of triggered me out of this like hazy cloud of um, aftermath
Mhm.
that I was in at the time. And it's the opening line, she broke the stone and now we know. So that night when that happened, I guess it just sort of jolted me out of this mindset that I was in, and I went home that night and wrote the song. So that's a little introduction to the song.
And was that the first song written for the album?
No. I'm trying to think what was the first song written for it. Oh, I know what it was. It was Nui. So the collection of songs, most of them, not all of them, but they came from my experience of doing an MLit in creative writing. So when I did that, my dissertation, it was like a mixed form folio. So I tend to, as a songwriter, I tend to write words first. I guess, like you could say, I write poetry first.
Mhm.
And my dissertation was sort of mix of poetry and lyric essays and little pieces of prose. And the collection kind of came from there. And Nui was the first song that formed from that collection of poetry.
So that's interesting that it came from your dissertation. And when you say it was mixed form, so it was like a folio itself of collected pieces.
Yeah, yeah. I found lots of people when they do creative writing at that sort of in a master's setting, lots of people are novelists, so they're
Yes.
perhaps working already on books. But yeah, I guess I kind of I'm the type of person who I probably spin a lot of plates, and I like to dip my toe into different types of forms. So I love writing essays and short stories and um, yeah, I guess I've got a very sort of strong interest in how different forms feed into one another. So, for example, if I write a song, I can create a whole world that's behind that song or that the song belongs to, or maybe there's a character in a story that has written a song, and so I love this relationship between the forms. So I tend to like, like it's almost like waves of thought that kind of flow into one another and sort of spill from one form into the other on the page.
So it's not as simple as saying, I'm writing this and I know it's a poem. I'm writing this and I know it's a song, or I know this is a longer piece. It can be more fluid than that.
I think so. I think so. Sometimes it can be straightforward, and a few times I've been lucky when I've had that experience, where it feels like a song's just come from somewhere else and it kind of just forms very quickly. Um, but other times it's almost like characters build and ideas, like they kind of take a while to ferment and they come from, like one sentence could spur on a whole idea for a story or vice versa.
Yeah. And Absentee, the album, what are the inspirations behind it?
Um, Lots of different inspirations. I think primarily Absentee as a track. was my response to lockdown.
Right.
And what I tried to do was to harness the frustrations, the sort of general frustrations that everybody was feeling at that time. But I feel that the album, in terms of themes, has it's a bit of a departure from my first album, Celine, which was really about love lost. Um, and what I've tried to do is to tap into much more sort of, I guess, recognizable themes of the human experience. So there are songs about love there, but it's not the main focus. There are songs about loss and death, and lockdown, as I say. But there's also, there's subtle messages in there about sort of social situations, and there's a few fictional characters in there as well. So I love myths and folklore, and I've kind of tried to dabble in a little bit of that too.
Yeah, because there's quite a few mythical references and allusions in the songs too. And I'm interested in the timeline of this. So you've got your first album, then were you doing your dissertation, and now you've got your second album. Is that kind of how it worked?
Yeah, that's right. And the album, it took a very long time to create. So it was, although it was mostly written over the space of a year when I did my creative writing course, in terms of recording and producing, it took about 7 years to make.
Oh,
And the reason for that was basically because of lockdown. So like the year after I was at university, I did most of the guitar recording, and then lockdown happened, and then I worked with a producer in Dundee called John Curran, and John and I tried our best to work remotely. I have a sort of similar setup to you that you do, in terms of a home office study, surrounded by all of my equipment and things. And I tried to record vocals. In fact, I did record some of the vocals from my home studio. But in terms of actually, building momentum and kind of coming up with nice, quirky ideas, John and I found that it really sort of halted our creative process. So, obviously, like many other people, we were sort of stuck in this situation where we were locked down, and that got lifted, and then we were locked down again. So it was very sort of like starting and stopping for a long time, which is why it took so long. So it really generally was just properly picked back up, I'd say, the start of last year, and then we were on a kind of home run to get it done and dusted.
I'm interested in if doing a creative writing course, or at least any course where your writing is getting marked as such, or at least assessed, if
Yeah,
that changed you as a writer, because I'm guessing that wouldn't have happened before.
definitely. Two sort of sides to that, because I think there's something lovely in not being educated in the thing that you do, because you work purely from a place of intuition. And if you're a creative person, I don't think that can ever be wrong. Um, but then on the flip side to that, I guess my experience of, as you quite rightly say, having work marked, and I guess getting feedback,
Mm.
regular feedback, what that allowed me to do, or I guess, yeah, it gave me a freedom actually that I didn't expect to get from that type of situation, and that was, it was the freedom to go deeper. So, the one thing that's been so important to me about doing that particular course was I was constantly reminded to trust my listener and to trust my reader,
Mhm.
and to not necessarily always have to spell out what I'm trying to communicate, is to leave the room. And when you leave the space, it's like, you're offering that time and the space for a subjective opinion to come in. And then it's really lovely, it's beautiful, because you're almost like, if you're painting a picture, you're almost creating what you would like to express, but then when you leave the space, then the viewer or the reader or the listener can actually take what you're offering them and make it their own. So
Yeah,
that was a lovely, lovely thing that I learned, and something that I'm really grateful for.
I think that's so interesting because often I think if you're creating anything, the instinct is to kind of fill every space, if it's a painting, or fill every note or whatever, but actually the spaces in between which allow people to bring their own imaginings to it can be very important, I think, in writing in particular.
Absolutely. Yep.
And what was the, I mean, you've mentioned a little bit about how the album was made. It was made over a long period of time. But what was the process like then? Once you managed to realize what you couldn't do due to certain restrictions, when they were lifted, what could you do? How was it made?
Well, I guess, I mean, I suppose in some ways lockdown actually did me service in the sense that because it, sort of relative to what we were just talking about there, it created space. And that then, because all of the songs were written, I had a long time to think about how I wanted them to sound. So during lockdown, I actually moved out to the Carse of Gowrie and was surrounded by beautiful countryside and forestry and lovely walks. And I've got a dog, so most days we'd just be out walking. And yeah, like especially when you're walking, there's something so beautiful that happens because it's like you've got a meter because you've got the rhythm of how you're
Mm.
walking. And that in itself, I think, almost like stirs ideas, um, sonic ideas, I mean. And yeah, so because I had that space and time to think about layering up and the type of instruments I'd like and the type of music landscape, the sonic landscape I'd like to create. It then allowed me to then when I did get back into the studio with John, to talk through all these ideas. And of course, John had his ideas as well. So we really approached the recording process and like lots of discussion. Um, Again, I keep thinking about painting just now. So it was like blending ideas and trying out things, and some things didn't work, some things did work, and there it was very sort of creative in the sense that we were exploring lots of different approaches, um, and yeah, we layered up. We like used like even I've got things like percussive instruments like singing bowls and lots of even like wind chimes and things that are in the music, although you might not necessarily hear them straight away. But yeah, did that answer your question? I don't know if I went on a tangent there.
No, no, it did because it was how the album, actually was thought and came about. What's a singing bowl for someone who doesn't know?
Oh, I wish I had one to hand. It's the one I've got is a Tibetan singing
Right.
bowl. So it is actually a bowl,
Uh-huh.
it's metal, and you get like a wooden, sort of like a small baton with it.
Oh, yes.
Like, like run it around the outside. Um, is absolutely gorgeous. And like sometimes it sings and sometimes it doesn't, but when it does, it's like a piercing, really high pitched piercing sound. Beautiful.
I know what you mean now that
Yeah.
you're a bit like when people used to play the glasses on
Yes.
television sometimes and they would
Yeah.
ringing sound.
Yeah.
And in terms of, I mean, you've mentioned John, but who else is on the album? Who else has helped out?
So on drums, Doug Hopton, who's a fantastic drummer musician from Dundee, and my sister actually makes her debut appearance on the album. So she plays a little bit of cornet, and the rest is done just myself and John. So we sort of John is a phenomenal guitarist. All of the electric guitars on the record are John, and between us, we did we put bass parts down. I play a bit of piano, so it does sound. I hope it sounds like a live album. That's the way I wanted it. That's the way I intended it to be received. But obviously, it's not. It wasn't recorded like that. It was very much layered up.
Yeah. Um, and was it a very different process from recording your first album? Had things changed in terms of what you could do or how you could do it, or did you keep it quite traditional?
I think what changed was probably both John and I, again, because of lockdown, we had a lot of time to hone ideas and to hone our skills. So, whereas before my approach probably would have been to work with session musicians and to maybe try and get people in the same room together, trying different things out. I guess like the main difference was that John and I did a lot of that work ourselves.
And what is your musical story? How did you initially get involved in making music?
It's a funny one. So, I was brought up with music. My mum is a singer and a pianist, and there was always a piano in the house. When I was a girl, there was always music sort of drifting in and out of different rooms. Um, and Throughout school was always musical. But then I sort of had this hiatus from music where I kind of left school and wasn't really. I left it alone for a while. I don't even know why, but obviously missed it. And I actually ended up working in events, and part of my job was to coordinate branding experiences at music festivals,
All right.
which I loved. But I got to the stage where I was always constantly watching people on the stage and thinking, my heart was tugging me, thinking like, I don't that's where I want to be. I don't want to be standing here. I want to be there. So I took up guitar. Like, so my main instruments when I was growing up were piano, and I played cornet as well. But in my 20s, I picked up guitar and I guess kind of taught myself some chords. And when I did that, I'm a massive Joni Mitchell fan. And obviously, because as most Joni fans will know, like she works in so many different open tunings. So I was really interested in that. So I played around with different open tunings, and then I think what happened was that because the beautiful drone of open tunings just opened your mind. It's like your mind, like a flower, opens up to this awakening of all the different variations of chords and the different sounds that you can create through the gift of open tunings. Yeah, I just started getting loads of ideas, and I like you did, went through that process as most songwriters do, where you're kind of plagued with ideas, and you wake up during the night, and you've got to like write and record them, and yeah, for a long time, it just came very naturally.
And then, so from there, when did you decide I'm not just going to play the guitar, I'm going to record music and I'm going to get it down? Because that's quite a bit, lots of people play a bit of music. Not everyone decides I'm going to make music.
Um, yeah, again, I think it was just because recording going into the studio and recording was my way of just basically being able to simply record the ideas that were in my head.
Sure.
So I did that quite quickly. I suppose songs started to form, and I just, before I could lose them, before I could get on to the next one, I had to get one down. So I recorded probably more than I performed for a long time. And I worked with, my starting band was called the Jagged Violet. So we were a four-piece blues band, and we gigged in like Scotland, Glasgow a few times. And we made uh, two, three, no, it's three, sorry, EPs. Um, so yeah, so I suppose I kind of I cut my teeth. Is that the right
That's
expression?
the right expression, yeah.
Um, yeah, that during that experience, and yeah, it was really I just felt so at home being in a music studio, and yeah, it was such an exciting thing to do. I'd strongly urge anybody who has ideas, who has music ideas and songs in their head, or like just to get into a studio and to put them down. It doesn't matter, what anybody thinks. Just go and experience it. It's incredible.
So you say you enjoy the recording process and getting them down. What about playing live? Is that something you love as well?
I've got a funny relationship with playing live, so it's something that until recently I have enjoyed less. I would say I'm not going to say I didn't enjoy it, but I'd say I have enjoyed less. Like, I love to create things. I feel like that's my purpose, and I just love that whole process because it's very it's exploring. It's like you don't really know what the end result's going to be. I love that mystery that comes with creating. And being in the studio, as I say, is just such a brilliant feeling because you've got everything that you need at your disposal to do what you want to do. Um, Being on the stage is a different beast because you're then kind of, well, you're no longer just in front of the mirror of yourself, but you're in front of a whole bunch of other energies, and that can be terrifying. And I had this very uncomfortable experience a few years ago when I was supporting Martin Stevenson in London. I was playing in the Bush Hall, and I was in the middle of quite a sort of delicate and very intimate song called Autumn Babe. And it's a finger picking song, and I just was completely crippled by the inner critic. And I froze on
Oh,
stage, and I
no.
forgot the words, and I forgot my chord shape, and I honestly, like, I didn't cry, but I don't know why I didn't cry, because I felt like crying. Um, and yeah, I think from that moment, I suffered, not
Mm.
just during that moment, but for probably about 3 days afterwards. I gave myself such a hard time and really suffered from that experience. And what that then did was it made me delve into the sort of psychological aspects of the inner critic and imposter syndrome. And yeah, from that experience, from that awful experience, I suppose every cloud is a silver lining, because I've just kind of explored what that means and what that does to the psyche. And now I'm going to try and touch wood here.
Yeah.
Now, I feel like when I go on stage, I kind of have a toolkit of skills and techniques in my head, not just, physically in
Yeah.
terms of playing, but like psychologically. I kind of feel like I go on stage now a little bit better equipped than I did before. So I'm on a journey with that, I'm not quite there yet, but I'm working on it.
Because you are undertaking quite a tour once again with Martin Stevenson and the Dainties
Yeah.
in autumn and into winter, aren't you?
That's right. Yeah. So we've got 20 dates. It's a full UK gig, and we're going over to Ireland as well. So we've got a gig in Belfast and a gig in Dublin. So yeah, my first experience of being on a tour. So very excited and very honoured to be asked to be joining them.
I mean, I'm a massive Martin Stevenson's and the Dainties fans. I've seen him many times when he's come to Glasgow and elsewhere as well. So that's hugely exciting. And I'll just say to listeners, there are a couple of Scottish dates. La Belle in Edinburgh and Slay in Glasgow, I think, are the two Scottish dates if you want to get along and see Nicola and Martin Stevenson as well.
Yep.
But Nicola, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I think the album's absolutely gorgeous. I think it does have that live feel to it. So it's interesting you saying that when we were talking about it.
I'm so pleased that you've enjoyed it, and thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, and all the very best with everything. And
Thank you.
this is Nicola Madill and the title track of the album, Absentee.